Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for Nemesis games, the fifth book in the Expanse series. And this was a weird one for me, and oddly enough made me appreciate the fifth season more. Though granted, I do think there are still problems with the fifth season. I can kind of see why, because of having read this, where they kind of come from. Because this is mainly split up into splitting up the Rossi crew, because it needs to be refitted and everything from all the shit that's been going on. Pretty much do a new outer hull, fix any inner hull kind of stuff, and everybody just starts kind of wandering off on their own. And that kind of fragments this book a lot, because you then have a lot of stuff that needs to be interwoven to try and set up what kind of goes on with the whole human conflict. That does put a lot of the proto-molecule stuff on the back burner in this book. So if you're really into the proto-molecule stuff, the main kind of thing you get into is like Marco Inaros and the Free Navy that eventually comes into play, stealing the proto-molecule sample that Fred Johnson has. That's about it. You do also have some weird shit going on with the gates and the other kind of entities that evidently are like in between spaces, kind of alluding to what's going on and what that kind of bullet thing was used in the fourth book. But the biggest kind of issue with this is how fragmented it is. Granted, we do get the perspectives of Alex, Amos, Holden, and Naomi. And that's good because then we can actually get into these characters' heads more. The kind of advantage that the show has had is that it kind of goes a little bit further, kind of similar in the style of Game of Thrones, where it's able to flesh out certain characters that really weren't as fleshed out in the books. Drummer is more of just the head of security in here and doesn't really get much to do. And that kind of sucks, because I remember Drummer being a really good character in the show, and they do a lot of stuff with her. It's just she's mainly in the background, and you really don't get much from her in here other than trying to deal with the shit that goes on at Tycho Station. So since the Rossi has to pretty much stay in there and be in there for a couple of weeks, everybody starts kind of going off on their own kind of little adventures. And that kind of works and kind of doesn't. I mean, I like the characters, but the situations they're somewhat put into seems to be kind of like, we need to do a holding pattern and then break ourselves out to what goes on with Marco Inaros in kind of like the sixth book / the sixth season. And I do not like the handling of Marco in this book either. It actually made me appreciate more of the seeding of Marco Inaros in the show more than in here, because he kind of just comes up out of nowhere and we just kind of get plot dumped that Naomi is in a relationship with him, has a son with him, and all that kind of stuff, and detailing kind of their whole kind of way of trying to do Belter supremacy and everything. It is not as well executed as I would have liked. Is it the worst kind of thing and completely took me out of it? No. No, I still liked and enjoyed this book, but you need better kind of build-up to him, because he just kind of like pops up out of nowhere and starts fucking winning shit, and it's just like, what? Now, granted, I don't mean that like everything has to be seeded before, but it's nice to have it, so that way you can sometimes get that sucker punch out of nowhere, which is what Marco's able to do on Earth. And it actually feel like it's kind of earned for that antagonistic character. And that's the kind of big thing. That is the kind of best one, other than Holden kind of dealing like, everybody's gone, and then he's got to deal with like, oh, okay, Marco's OPA faction starts kind of going off and going further. They start to try and assassinate Fred Johnson, the dude that's pretty much been the chief engineer and been doing stuff with the Rossi, has tampered with it, and they got to figure out what to do with that. Holden kind of becomes a bodyguard for Fred to kind of help him out and kind of suss out what's going on, even though the proto-molecule has already been stolen, and figuring out kind of Marco's other kind of plays. Holden then also gets roped up with Monica, and it feels kind of like a point of like Monica, it's kind of a misdirection to try and like put them stupidly on Marco's tail, because they're trying to figure out why all these ships are disappearing, but it's more connected to the ring than Marco just taking ships and like changing transponders. because he then tells Alex, who's pretty much gone to Mars, to see, from Illis, he had gotten the whole kind of stuff that was going on with his family, so he wanted to pretty much talk to his ex-wife, and she's like, fuck you. And then he just pretty much links up with Bobby, who had pretty much gotten a job offer from Avasarala to look into Martian shit disappearing, and how there's pretty much a splinter group of Martians who are like, Mars isn't going to be terraformed, let's go and get our own shit. And that's pretty much the extent that we get from it, from, let's see, towards the end, which that character fucking gets screwed over. Damn it. Saverte and Duarte, they start giving us kind of more information, because evidently they found some kind of artifact thing linked to the protomolecule, and Cortazar, who, if you've watched the show, is more prominent in the show and then linked back up. Here he just kind of pops up out of nowhere. There's a weird tendency on certain kind of things of character to just pop up, and it's just like, shit. Now granted, I don't mind like a character's done for a certain kind of bit, and then just, oh, okay, but he just pops, is like, yeah, I'm working with these people and doing stuff with the protomolecule and all that. And this dude's like, yeah, he's trying to be like this cool kind of captain thing before the space between entities fucking eats their shit pretty much in them. Because that's the big kind of thing. There's these rings evidently operate on some kind of in-between space, which is interesting. Because you think, okay, there's molecules and atoms and there's space in between them. Is there anything in that space? That's the scary kind of thing, and how trying to travel faster than light and all that kind of stuff kind of pops up. So that's the kind of cool stuff that kind of leads into what's going on. It really feels like trying to build up everything that needed to be done for the conflict for Marco and Aros, and then kind of dealing with the fallout of that. And that's why it's kind of weak, because you have to do certain kind of things. Amos pretty much goes to Earth because of his adopted kind of mother Lydia dying, and it is interesting because he goes around to certain other places, whereas in the show he pretty much just immediately goes to Baltimore and is just shown into Baltimore. It actually kind of works better in, I think, the favor of the show, where you're cutting out some kind of chaff pretty much. He does have his kind of little bit with Avasarala to kind of figure out why the fuck he's on Earth and what he's kind of doing, but it's mainly to put Amos there so that way we have a point of view character, which is kind of weird because I'm reading book 6 and we've already got Anna, who we have already had a kind of thing, so it would have been just as much interesting to have her kind of dealing with it. But it's mainly, I think, Amos to go down there, see what happened with the devastation on Earth with Marco and Narcis's attack, and then having him get Peaches, Clarissa Mao, and have her brought on the Rossi. And it's interesting to have her kind of set up as a redemption kind of arc, as they have to deal with trying to get everywhere on Earth and then trying to get off of Earth. It almost was like, okay, we need Clarissa Mao for some reason. Put Amos there, and having to try and work back and trying to then get him off in a certain kind of instance. We do get his kind of backstory of him being in the underbelly of Baltimore, being connected with someone who took over running pretty much Baltimore, and then everything going to shit. Because in the beginning of the book, we see that Philip, Naomi's son, ran a raid on a Martian government facility and stole this stealth coding, and they pretty much stealth coded the rocks and had them thrown at Earth. And Marco tries to execute this plan, taking Naomi, wanting the Rossi, and doing all this kind of stuff, but then eventually doing his whole kind of spiel of being like, yes, we will, trying to be this whole kind of leader and everything like that for the Belters and everything, even though he's pretty much fucked over Earth by tossing rocks at it. Granted, Naomi's the only one that kind of understands the ramifications, whereas all the Belters who have been oppressed and have all that kind of anger and resentment over how the inner planets have treated them, and just be like, yeah, it's you think that you're going to be dying out because of all these outer planets and everything, but people will still need spaceships. People will still need resources from outer space that they probably won't be able to get from certain kind of planets, or at least easily accessible without vastly damaging the ecosystem. I understand that they feel that they're going to be fucked over. And granted, they have been fucked over, but them dying out and being useless, it needed to be worked on a little bit more. Whereas they're just like, there's a good amount of like the radical kind of belters that are with Marco's kind of thing of like, let's throw rocks at like the only fucking planet that we know isn't going to like kill us from the air, the water, or any kind of food sources that are like useful to it. Except, so we're just gonna chuck shit at it and pretty much try and have it die. And the thing is, they do, the authors do a good job of selling it being a terroristic attack and the kind of aftermath, but they kind of overstate it of like Earth being killed and that it's dying. It's like, yes, throw a couple rocks at it, we'll fuck it up and screw over the ecosystem and everything, but you're gonna have to do a lot more than that and probably proto-molecule the motherfucking thing to kind of do it. They kind of keep hammering that on, and it's like, I need a little bit more proof. Now, granted, we get into like all the casualties and everything, billions of people dying and all that, but it's just, this is the stupidest kind of plan possible, in my opinion. Now, granted, this is more of a revenge thing, and Marco trying to come out on top through violence. How other assholes, dictators, fascist fuckers usually kind of do their kind of play. Where they're like, yes, it's going to be different and everything, even though I'm using the exact same playbook that other fuckers would have been doing. Using Martian warships, state of the art, and trying to lock down everything and keep everybody on Earth and Mars and be like, the Belters reign supreme here. It's like, that's okay. Quick question though. Where will you get food and water in enough quantities to make sure that all the people that you don't really actually give a fuck about don't starve and die and then revolt against you and tell you to go get fucked with a goddamn rusty spoon, you dumb fucking bastard? Because, except for like Fred Johnson's OPA and maybe Anderson Dawes, Earth and Mars could tell you to get fucked, and Ganymede could just be like, you can eat dick and not give you food, water, or anything like that, and they'll just let you die out like that. And that wouldn't be all the Belters. That would be the ones that are being giant cockmongers, just fucking around, being like, I'm the biggest cock around, kind of shit. I know I'm harping on that, but that's the kind of biggest kind of thing. So Amos's kind of part is kind of dealing with that. Alex fucks off to Mars to essentially get hooked up in Bobby's conspiracy of trying to find shit, while Holden's like, hey, ships are disappearing, why don't you look at this thing? And then just randomly stumbled upon Marco's kind of staging point to go after the Martian Prime Minister, which he fails. He killed the Secretary General of the UN, but Avasarala then takes over on that, and she's like, ha! If you know Christian Avasarala, you know that he done fucked up, and she is gonna fucking roar that motherfucker up like ain't nobody's business. And then, of course, Fred Johnson wasn't killed either, so they pretty much all link up. Holden gets his ship back into effect. Naomi gets captured by Marco, and he's like, he's preening, be a dickhole. And we do get into her headspace of, like, how she tried to kill herself, and how her child was used against her, but she deemed that she had to escape. And Philip still doesn't get that, and he's been pretty much under the control of a narcissistic cockmonger and warhound, so of course he's going to hate his mother because he's going to be telling all kinds of venom and lies, even though she would have taken him from him because he's being a dipshit. And then everybody's trying to get her back on, like, you are all a bunch of assholes. Now, granted, she doesn't go to the step of being like, you're doing the same shit that everybody's done to you, so why are you any better, and how does this change anything or make anything better? Especially because how are you going to build the giant kind of spaceships that you need? In space! What are you going to need? People kind of suited to space to kind of build that shit. But here, there, everywhere. Alex on that. So Holden pretty much takes Fred to kind of like the meeting. They kind of hook up with Alex. Alex does not die in this either. Bull has already died in the third book. So that's a different kind of thing. Yeah. But see, the thing is, with the show, there were the actor for Alex presented problems of like sexual harassment and everything, and as they investigated, they pretty much killed Alex's character. Which it will be interesting to see how that changes up the stories that I get into going forward, since Alex is alive in book 6, where Bull kind of takes over his piloting duties in the show. Like, granted, out of all the things that they needed to do, that's an interesting kind of change up. Now, Bolt wasn't really as big of a character in like the show with the 3rd season as he kind of was in the 3rd book. So it was a change that kind of worked out well enough on it. And that kind of changes how the rescue of Naomi kind of works, as she's on the Chetzamoka, which is a ship that she got for Philip to like get them where they needed to go. And the thing is, Philip then captured her, and they did the whole kind of bit on the Pella and her pretty much trying to escape to help Holden, because she was responsible for this kind of software that could do this kind of magnetic bottle containment failure for ships, and it was going to happen to the Rossi, but then they're like, okay, that didn't work out, so we're going to do it with the Chetzamoka, make a fake kind of distress signal with Naomi. That'll draw Holden in, we'll kill the Rossi, we'll be good. But she gets on there, fixes it, and Alex, Bobby, and the Prime Minister, Mars Smith, are able to pretty much use the Razorback, help, and get Naomi out, and then they get on the Rossi, and Avasarala pretty much brings them together and wants to utilize the Rossi to take the fight to Marco, and have Bobby, and she pretty much wants to utilize this as a coalition of being like, no, this isn't a war. This is everybody that's been fucked over by Marco and Earth, Mars, and the Belt. And you see that the Rossi is a big kind of important component of that, because you've got Earthers, Martians, and Belters, even though it's just Naomi. So it shows that like everybody can work together, and having to try and kind of deal with that. So it's like, all right, and have kind of plans with that, as they're pretty much trying to figure out a response to take him on. Let's see. And of course, they bring up Clarissa kind of joining the group and being like, yeah, this is going to be kind of weird. And Holden is... We get more of Holden kind of talking about that in the 6th book. But it is interesting because it's like, alright, can she be redeemed? But then you're always in the back of your mind being like, okay, she might be cool now, but she's killed a lot of people. What's her kind of thought process going to be? Like, that was even before she tried to go and kill like Holden and all that kind of shit. Like, she killed people that she fucking liked, just because it was in the way of her objective. You kind of need to see proof that it's kind of changed up. So I do like Holden kind of like dealing with that and actually talking that through with like Naomi and all that. But Amos is like, he kind of wants to help her, like others have helped him as well. And it's cool to kind of see his thought process of how he's trying to go through certain kind of things on Earth, trying to survive, while still trying to retain what he has learned of Holden, and how he kind of views him as a moral compass of what's right and what's wrong, and how to go through certain things. He's not afraid to implement violence, but he doesn't go to it as his first kind of go-to. You really see that throughout the books, but also the show as well, of where he will not immediately go to violence as like his first kind of shot, but he is ready for it if it comes into effect. And that's like the biggest kind of thing that you really get out of Amos's kind of stuff, even though it is the weakest kind of plot-wise. Still, like, the biggest kind of advantage of this book is the character work. Granted, the plot kind of fucking doodads with it a little bit, but not a lot. You know what I mean? Like, because they have to figure out what kind of things to do in certain kind of situations. It's the plot and getting everything to flow together that kind of needed some work for me. Not that that's all bad, but like, you jump around a lot, and it's not as cohesive until you get towards the end, and you're like, oh, okay. You then figure out, all right, all of this was pretty much done to get Marco as the big bad and get everything kind of worked out. And it just needed something better to get executed. Again, not the worst. I have read other books or seen other shows and everything that has done a worse kind of way of trying to set up plots and make it. Oh god, fucking Yakuza, where like villains will come out of fucking nowhere at the last hour. Granted, there are also JRPGs that are like, hey, guess what? It's the end of the game. You gotta fight God. I've almost wondered if that will happen in the Yakuza series, since it has now turned turn-based in certain kind of instances, but that's a whole other kind of issue. But not everything jived together as well as it needed to. Certain kind of things could have been shortened to a point to kind of flow kind of better, or other kind of characters could have been used, and other kind of situations could have been in effect. I would have put Clarissa Mao in an orbiting kind of station, or maybe even on Luna, to where Amos didn't even really need to go to go to Earth, and instead was just like, you know what, I kind of want to go fucking, I want to go just balls wild, and decides to go to like Luna, and Alex just teams along with him, and then shit starts going kind of nutty. Clarissa Mao kind of has some kind of information or whatnot on some kind of secret kind of shipyard or whatnot that the Mao Industries had, and that Marco Inaros could have potentially have been doing stuff with, where it's dealing with proto-molecule shit. That's another thing that I need to bring up. There is more kind of seeded shit in here with certain kind of uses of the proto-molecule that isn't really as shown in the show. Now, granted, it's not that big in here. I wish it was kind of more, because you see certain kind of things. You see it more in the 6th book, linking up with like rail cannons and shit, where they're actively utilizing certain kind of things that they've learned from the proto-molecule to make certain tech better, like walls, railguns, and all that kind of stuff. There's just other kind of ways that this could have worked, because it just seemed like everybody got like a random side quest, and they kind of seeded in certain kind of shit to kind of link it up with Marco and Narcissus kind of stuff, who had just came out of nowhere like, surprise motherfucker. There were just like bits and pieces where he popped up in like previous books that I just wanted better kind of seeding for, and then we just get full ramp up into how he's connected to Naomi with this, whereas in the show it's kind of done a little bit better, even though I still think that they needed to do better kind of work on it. Granted, different kind of mediums, I understand the adaptation challenges, and it makes me appreciate that they had to make certain kind of changes in the show and kind of did a little bit better, even though I still have some kind of problems with it. I know it sounds weird, but I still enjoy it, and I still enjoy the characters and understanding the politics of what's kind of going on, even though most of it's like, Marco's fringe is fucking stupid as shit, and it's like, yep, that's usually how it fucking goes. Like, granted, Earth and Mars and the OPA should be doing better to help the Belters and everything, but sometimes there's going to be a fucknut that's like, I'm going to burn everything down. It's like, do you have any better plans than that? Like, I want to fix systems and shit too, man. I don't think the Belters should be fucked over. I don't think that they should have water and food and air hold over their heads if they don't comply. But if you're tossing rocks at a motherfucker, yeah, you're going to have problems and issues, especially when it's the only known viable place that you can get your shit. Especially since you're still fucking a doodah with the other kind of planets, and you don't know what the fuck's going on with it. I'm sorry to harp on that point, but it's like, you need to think about this, and granted, if a lot of people are like, yeah, and the book pretty much shows these people are stupid, and these are the consequences for it, then I'm all kind of for it, you know what I mean? And show the consequences of that. But yeah, not much really else to really go into, I don't think, because you see a lot of the stuff from the show as well. It's just Alex goes with his pretense for his ex. That doesn't go well, and then he just kind of gets roped in with Bobby, and then they go and they figure out, and then that's kind of how they link up. Amos is like, shit, rocks, and then I gotta get Clarissa Mao, and then well, he went to go visit because he's like, I'm never coming to Earth again. And then the rocks fall, and then it's like, ah, shit. And then they kind of escape that. Holden is the one that kind of worked the most for me. And then Naomi's helped to give us information on Marco. Also, the interesting kind of stuff of like going out in the vacuum without a suit and the kind of repercussions of that. It's just, it needed something to work better for me, and I don't know exactly what. It's just the execution and the tying of everything together. Yeah. So, those are my opinions on the book. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.